All right. Good morning, everyone. I guess maybe we're starting a slight bit early. But maybe there's a few things to say before we begin our meditation. Yesterday we began to study the 7 cosmic paths, which are found at the end of a treatise on cosmic fire, and also in a concluding section, or one of the later sections of Rays and the Initiations, as well as Initiation Human and Solar. All of this is purely speculative for us, because not only must one be a master before it begins to make sense, but even a 6th degree initiate, and even they don't know what they will encounter on these paths. But it does give a certain amazing perspective about destiny and destinations. So I thought, well, okay, in terms of meditation, is there any way we can relate to this? And of course the answer is not really. But we can meditate on our sense of values and the decisions which would come out of those values when we are focused at different levels of our energy system. Because clearly the deciding factor is much differently situated at different levels of identification. When we're in our emotions, we decide in a certain way, oftentimes, according to our emotional bias. When we're strictly in the mind, we might involve rational decisions. When we realize ourselves to be a personality, an individual, still other decisions might emerge. And if we awaken to ourselves as the soul in incarnation, our values change and other decisions emerge. What if we are able to have at least the imaginative sense of being the soul on its own plane, or at least on the higher mental plane? And what if we began to, or could in some way, situate our consciousness within the spiritual triad? Of course, that's really the prerogative of a master or an arhat, and we perhaps get slight touches of those high levels of realization. But when we're dealing with the cosmic paths, and these are decisions that for most of us are lying thousands of years into the future, then we are viewing the world, identifying with our environment as if we were the spirit itself, the monad. And what would our perspective be? Those who are making decisions are monads making decisions, and we hardly know what that's like. But maybe we can approach that just a little bit and get a sense of the different perspectives that are possible to us in this evaluation process and the decisions that come out of our values. So that's kind of the theme of the meditation this morning, which I'm going to improvise. I've got in front of us this map, which is a composite map, and on it we see the different psychic powers and abilities that pertain to the various subplanes, and that could be relevant. But this is an experiential, imaginative approach, and let us see if something emerges from doing this kind of work. So we'll take a few moments to become aware of the instrument. And I won't go into the usual soul alignment immediately. We'll try something a little different here. And this will require the exercise of the creative imagination. Suppose we could find a center of identity within the physical brain itself, or within the etheric physical brain. And we have the sense very much of being embodied, as if the physical body is very real, even though we know it is not a principle. But we are the embodied human being. And our world, the world that is most impressive upon us in this state, is the dense physical world which the senses reveal. When we are feeling very much in the body, and as an acting, moving vehicle in this lowest world, what is our state of consciousness? What do we tend to value? Many of us can say it's been a long time since we've been in such a state, and that certainly we are focused higher. But just as an experiment, you can think back to the days when you were perhaps younger and the physical body was a more immediate instrument and of greater concern. Did we value physical things more? And did we decide for them, as it were? The gratification of the various aspects of the instinctual nature. Did such things concern us? And even now, the rhythm of nourishing the body, eating, etc., has to be observed. One has to decide what one will eat, let us say. one has to sleep when one is fatigued. These are decisions within the realm of sense and instinct. But suppose then we could focus more within the solar plexus, and in the sentient body, the body of feeling, the astral nature. Let's see if we can put ourselves within this field. And when this relatively strong vehicle, at least for most people, is making its presence strongly felt, what are the things we tend to value? And do emotions and feelings bias or determine our decisions? Try to put yourself in a state where some answer comes to this. You're under the sway of emotion. The feeling nature is strong. What types of decisions are you inclined then to make? For what do you decide? Evaluate. Does this field of your energy system much affect your decision-making process? Can you think of instances in which it does or recently has? And perhaps such decisions, or very likely, are not always the most rational, nor even the most wise, but they seem to have their emotional justification. And I'm sure if we continue to think in a focused manner, various decisions impelled by emotional inclination or feeling states will present themselves to our consciousness. Now let's move up to the lower mind, and let us assume that we can detach ourselves from that state of consciousness so prevalent in many, which is called kama-manas. Let us assume that we can use the mind divorced from the impulse of emotion, which so many people, of course, cannot do. Do we have the experience of being very much focused in the lower thinking mind, which is strongly rational, what do we tend to value in this position of consciousness? And can we find recent decisions which have been made from this position? Let us search our life and see if we ever decide in this manner. Do we actually find that we can isolate this field from other impulses and work largely within it? Think of your problem-solving tendencies. Can you isolate instances in your life when this particular focus is sustained during the decision-making process? Now suppose you have the sense of yourself actually as a integrating personality, or perhaps an integrated personality. And there are times when all of us are more personality than soul. What do you value as a personality? And what type of decisions do you make when you are more a personality than a soul? Can you find any recent examples when the decision-making process occurred from this level of identification as a person? Of course, there is an interpenetration of all these factors. We know that. But for the sake of this exercise, we try to isolate them and see if there is a qualitative difference in our values and the kinds of decisions which grow out of these values. But now we enter that part of the meditation which is the real point. We will use our creative imagination to imagine that we are abstracting as a point of identity out of the personality, behind it, within it, at a deeper level. And we seek to feel a kind of identification as a soul, meaning that our consciousness is, at least imaginatively, capable of focusing on the higher mental plane. And therefore our environment is quite different than what it is in the three lower worlds. We are as if within the egoic lotus, which Master DK has so beautifully described in a number of sections in the books. We are in a realm of light, of scintillating color, of harmonious sound. We are in the presence of soul love, and we feel a certain will power which is unlike personality will or personality determination. So let us attempt to establish the sense of this world, using the imagination as necessary. The sense of being focused in this world of the soul. We want to try to make this realization vivid to the consciousness, even more real than the more customary presentations in the lower world. We want to establish what we would call a soul perspective. So when you are in this level of identification, what is your perspective? What are your values? For what are you inclined to decide? What do you value at this place of identification? can you think of a decision made recently in which the decision process was taken from this level of identification? What was that decision, if one occurred? What kind of action did it lead to? Do you very often make decisions from this level of identification? Well, this is the point of identification we are attempting to establish. In the beginning of Letters on Occult Meditation, Master DK tells us of the necessity of learning to focus within the causal body and how few people can actually do that. This would make the meditation process successful. But now let us experiment and go into more uncharted territory, because we are trying to move towards that state of consciousness wherein the greater decisions relating to the 7 or 9 cosmic paths are made. And of course we can't do it, but we may get some glimmer of what is involved. So let us imaginatively raise the point of consciousness, the point of being consciousness, into the impersonal world of the Spiritual Triad, which is a reflection of the mind of God, the love of God, the will of God, the planetary logos. And we imagine that we are within 3 fields built around the higher permanent atoms found in the triad: a monastic field, a Buddhic intuitive field, an atomic field. Now, none of these yet are fully built in our case, but we imagine. And now our sense of identification is much less individual, much more planetary. Our consciousness is being planetarized. It's beyond the individual. It's trans-individual, not just trans-personal. It's about the plan. It's about a higher will and a more encompassing love and a more comprehensive mind, which in a way does not belong to us individually at all. It's a vast perspective that the Arhats and Masters have established within their consciousness. So what is that perspective? Try to get a sense of it, a little inner experience, an imaginative experience of the perspective that is possible to you here. We're dealing with impersonal relations and patterns, with ideas that are on the verge of precipitating in line with the plan. We're dealing with divine intention and the will to carry it out. Do we ever focus here? But just imagine if we could focus here. What would we value? What would be our values? Would we not, like the Masters, think in terms of the welfare of the entire planet? And how would we decide? What trend would our decision-making process take? Try to see if we've ever made a decision from this perspective. Maybe we never have, but if we were to do so, what do we imagine would be involved? Would not the welfare of the planet and its kingdoms and its different dimensions be our concern? And the little self-centered unit, even the individual unit, would it not fade away in importance as the divine plan on the atmic plane became our major preoccupation? We would be deciding far above and beyond the usual level of decision-making which we entertain. So we'll have to come back to this kind of experiment and see if we can make it increasingly real to our consciousness. But what if, for the sake of argument, for the sake of expanding the perspective and trying to get some glimmer of what the very high souls face when they make their great decision, what if we could find ourselves to be the monad in the world of being? What if we could hide all difference and blot out all form? What if the realm of pure being could be entered? And we could have a sense of our nature as an immortal spirit, who is journeying through the 5 lower worlds over billions of years, but who is essentially a divine spark, suspended from the flame, can we get rid of our identifications in the 5 worlds, at least imaginatively, and find that we are will, wisdom, and activity, and at the center of it all, pure being, a point of being, consciousness. This would negate the seeming reality of the lower worlds. It would negate the seeming reality of the egoic lotus. It would even negate the triadal worlds. And it would give us some idea of the state of those who decide which of the 7 or 9 cosmic paths they will pursue. The mind, the personality, they do not make such a decision. The soul upon the higher mental plane, it does not make such a decision. Even the consciousness liberated into the triad does not make such a decision. It is the monad, man as the monad, which makes this decision. What would be our perspective if we were a realized point of pure being? How would the world look? Would our concerns be planetary? Would they perhaps be systemic? Would we begin to look even towards a destination which was cosmic and which involved departing from the solar system? What would we take into consideration as choice was made from this perspective? Well, this is the slightest anticipation of that which will face all of us, each of us and all of us, in millennia ahead. And meanwhile, we have to work our way up into broader and broader levels of identification, until one day we know what it is to drop everything on the 5 lower planes and rediscover ourselves as spirit, monad, pure being. And as we study these advanced matters today, which in a way is a pretty audacious undertaking, we try to preserve some sense of what it means to be a different type of being at different levels, with values related to the levels, and with decisions emerging from the perspectives which those levels present. Right now we have no idea what we will see and understand when we are liberated monads, having passed through the 5 worlds of human and superhuman evolution. But we know the day will come, and we know that our perspective will be vast. And we preserve the idea that when masters are making these decisions, their perspective is vast. And even so, they can decide incorrectly, as has happened. So we realize the depth of the subject we are getting into. We approach it with humility and with the attempt to understand at least a little something of that which indicates the destiny of every member of the hierarchy. Now we will, together holding the alignment, we will sound the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the center of love, let's start again. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Oh, okay. These are little experiments going along the entire range of possible identifications. And of course, without the use of the creative imagination, we cannot do that. Was there anything of interest for you? Any kind of realizations that occurred at different levels? Any perspectives that changed at different levels? Because I'm doing this along with you, obviously. I'm not just leading a meditation, I'm performing it while doing it, and there certainly was for me. Once we started getting above the personality level, things really began to look different. And there was quite a distinction when getting into the triadal level, which is very impersonal. Somehow, very planetary. I'm reminded of that book by Dane Rudhyar called The Planetarization of Consciousness. Maybe they changed the name of it somewhere along the line, but when he first put it out, it was called The Planetarization of Consciousness. And DK said he was a world disciple. That's why he wasn't involved in the Alice Bailey groups, because he had already achieved that world disciple status. So, that pretty well meant that he was an initiate of the third degree. And I was thinking, boy, from this triadal perspective, being concerned about the welfare of the planet per se, not just any one part of it, not just any one kingdom. Of course, that people have their specialties. They work with the different kingdoms of nature and sometimes with humanity and so forth. But just imagine having to look at the whole thing and try to keep the balance of the whole in your mind the way the hierarchy does, because they are focused in the triad. You know, the arhats are Buddhic polarization, the masters atmic polarization. So one can experiment with this, you know, and I think get some very different senses of things. Like, what do I see? What's my perspective now? What do I value now from this perspective? And on the basis of my values, what will I decide? So you can only wonder when these Chohans achieve their monadic nature. What do they see? Because according to what they see and according to who they think they are, they make a decision which is determining for how many years. It goes on and on and on and on. Yeah, and you got some words, yes. First one was clear, clarity. A little glimpse of color. Frozen blue. Frozen blue. Okay. You know, when you said clarity, I'm reminded of something which pertains to the sixth initiation of decision. And those who go through that are called, I don't know if I can say it exactly right, but pretty close, victors through pure, clear will. Victors through, or clear, pure will, or pure, clear will. And they have triumphed through the assertion of the pure monadic will, informed by everything, a knowledge of everything they've done before, and maybe with a sense of where they've come from. Because I think we oftentimes reascend along the line we descended. See, the monad came down. It wasn't always upon the monadic plane and the cosmic physical plane. It has a different kind of origin altogether. And according to that origin, it will oftentimes take its line. So for you, this whole color thing it's essential. And, you know, there is, on the path of the planetary logoi, we will discuss that, but there's some kind of thing called prismatic identification. It has something to do with the whole range of notes and the whole range of colors that every planetary logos has to master. We'll see if that looks significant for us at a time. Yes, did you have anything here? One. When we were focusing upon the mental plane, I was amazed again at how these planes are worlds unto themselves. Not just some little point. It's a whole dimension or world. Then, interesting was that on the higher mental plane appeared a point of focus or a whole with a color. I was seeing the sky blue point and went through that and beyond. And on the way, it was changing towards deeper and intense blue, becoming like indigo blue and black.
And then as you too, you were saying everything changed.
What did you say? You saw? When you did? When we went beyond the mental plane, everything changed. Higher mental plane. The mystery in that. A great mystery. You know you're not there, and yet you get some kind of impression. How is it possible? How is it happening? I tried to be so alert, reflecting Buddha's words, be vigilant, be vigilant. I tried to be so quiet and vigilant. And I'm realizing how all of these impressions make the aura quiet, like all the other lives in my universe became in that alignment, as if aware of something greater. It was a fantastic and funny feeling. I was understanding my lower life while I was understanding a higher part of me, being vigilant. Some of the realizations were, one has to understand proportion. I was thinking, why do we talk about angel with a flaming sword, which is not letting anybody go further, because the worlds are so vast, incredibly different. One would be immediately lost if one is not ready. The perspective, how we here start to reflect these higher worlds via sacred geometry. There's laws of proportion. Sacred geometry helps us reflect these higher worlds. And then the lower one went. So there was like immediate response. And the lower one went, the more delay. The lower one went, there was more delay. More delay, more resistance. Reaching a place like there was no response at all. It was so low. Something was just standing there, not responding. And so I understood more about being awakened, how these worlds really are different. And somehow I sensed the galaxy feeling. I was in the worlds of galaxies. The analogy, it was the same way, going beyond, and then when we were aligning with the monad, this black Buddha, I could sense some kind of black Buddha thinking about color, of Shiva and Krishna, and the colors involved, how they are expressed in color. These worlds will not. Because it's like personal point of view of the being who has no boundaries, but yet it was like appearing into my mind that Buddha. Appearing into my mind was a black Buddha. Where I was in the place where I would have just wanted to be in silence. I wanted to be in silence and communion. I tried to follow. But the deeper one, the deeper the presence took one, everything in the outer had to be shut down or somehow fade away. It just was enormous spirit. It just was an enormous spirit. And then I sensed this breath, did you say? Breath that was coming out of this. Like a life-giving impulse. So I was thinking how one could every day. I was thinking how one could every day just how it is how it is a real exercise of breathing, how the breath is somehow so in immediate relationship with the monad, with being. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay. Good. Well, friends, we will come back around 9:30 Danish time, which is 7:30 GMT and 8:30 British summertime. Remember, British summertime and GMT are not the same. GMT is universal time. And then we will continue our work. We're discussing the first cosmic path of Earth service. We discussed it as it appeared in Cosmic Fire yesterday, and we will continue with what is said in the rays and the initiations today, and we will make our way forward the best we can. I don't know if we'll finish all of these paths, discussion of them, and next time, 6 months from now, we are kind of committed to studying the stanzas of Dzyan, the 20 stanzas in Cosmic Fire, full of symbolic language. So we have our work cut out for us. Okay, so we'll take our break now and come back in about 40 minutes.